Hey everyone, this is Jun,
And this is Daniel,
and we are Korean.
American. June,
Yeah,
have you seen these people wearing this shirt and it says nerdy on it?
yeah. I think it's quite popular.
Nerdy is
amongst
becoming quite popular.
amongst the young people.
Do you know anything about this brand?
I don't know. I think I've seen a store in the 백화점, the department store once, but I think it's very geared towards like the teenage or the early 20 generation,
Which we are not in.
which we are not.
Well, I don't want to talk about. There are two things we could talk about that I don't want to. I don't want to talk about brands.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about how things become popular. But what I did want to talk about is the idea or concept of even being nerdy.
Nerdy.
Yeah.
The term nerdy has become a thing in Korea to the extent of like actually using the English word nerdy in Korea.
Really?
Like 너드.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, because I had a conversation about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It's still like really clear in my mind. My mind was blown. And back then it felt like nerdy was not even a concept in Korean culture.
I don't think it was.
So this is a very new thing.
Yeah, I think we picked it up definitely within the past 3 years or so.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you know if there's like an urban dictionary in Korea where you can find out why nerdy started to become a word?
Not specifically for words per se,
Yeah.
but there's the Korean version of wiki, which is called Namu Wiki.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that before sometimes in my Google
I
searches.
think it's more casual than wiki.
Yeah.
Wiki feels more official.
Yes.
And Namu Wiki is more casual,
Okay.
but it's more like more raw
Yeah.
in a sense, which makes it more fun and interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we don't have to look up nerdy and Namuwiki. I'm not convinced anything interesting would come up, but I did want to ask you maybe to lead. What do you think of, like, what does being nerdy mean to you? And as a Korean, how do you think about being nerdy?
Nerdy. I think in Korea, being nerdy is quite neutral. It describes a characteristic, but I don't think it has a very negative connotation per se. Yeah, there to the extent of like having a word called 너드미,
Yeah.
with like having mi meaning beauty
Oh.
together, like the Korean word or Chinese word specifically mi combined with the word nerd, saying like 너드미 is like the beauty of being like the nerd beauty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So it's actually, in that sense, it sounds positive.
It sounds positive.
Oh.
Like I don't know a lot about like K-pop idol fandoms and whatnot, but I witnessed a lot of times describing, let's say, some member of like this boy band and calling them they have 너드미
Yeah.
as a good thing.
Oh. They have like nerd beauty.
Yeah, nerd beauty.
Quick tangent, by the way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that me and, you said is beauty. That's the same as migook, like America, right?
That's
Like
interesting.
U.S. being the land of beauty or the beautiful land. Is that the direct translation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another tangent. Japan and Korea uses the same pronunciation, 미국,
Oh,
but Japan uses a different Chinese character for that.
really?
They don't use the word beauty.
Do you know what the Japanese version means?
They use the word mi for rice,
Oh, so it's a land of plenty, like lots of rice.
rice land.
Rice land. It just means like it's plentiful and bountiful.
Okay, this is just my personal opinion, and we probably can easily find this out in like, again, Namowiki.
Yeah.
But I always thought it came from like the poor relationship between Japan and the U.S. during the Second World War.
Yeah.
They wanted to belittle the country to make it like a small grain.
Oh, interesting. So rice land could actually mean
Again,
something negative.
Might be totally false.
Yeah. But, Japan must have had a name for the U.S. before World War II, right?
You're right.
So
Maybe they have like imported rice from the States.
debunked.
Anyways.
Fact checker
Yeah.
over here. No.
Anyways, yeah. But that is true that Japanese people use the word rice for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, back on point.
Mm-hmm.
Are you interested in how Americans think of the word nerdy?
Yes.
Nerdy, there is no way that it can be even neutral. I think it is just strictly negative. I think there is maybe a similar word, dork or dorky, and that one can refer more to like kind of being neutral to positive or being endearing.
Interesting.
Like, oh, you're such a dork. And dorky, I think, just means like being really focused and into something. And maybe that something's a little weird, right? But nerdy, I think, implies a level of social unawareness, awkwardness. Just like, your prototypical nerd is wearing glasses with really thick lenses. These are not fashionable glasses. They have, unfashionable clothing. They might have bad breath, bad teeth, poor hygiene. But, they are generally thought of as smart, right? And I think that's what a nerd is. And yeah, I mean,
American people think being smart is not good.
I mean, do Korean? Yeah, of course. I mean, to me, it's obvious. Like, if you're smart, it's not that it's not good, but it's easy to make fun of you. You're generally weaker. Like, you should, be at the bottom of the social totem pole in high school.
This is mind blowing because you get made fun of for being smart.
Yes, all the time.
Do you think that,
as someone who grew up, quite smart, let's say, objectively based on scores or whatever, yeah, I was made fun of all the time.
Do you think that it in some way negatively impacted the entire economy or like society in general of the US? Being smart should be something good, right?
I agree with you, but it's so ingrained in me that I guess like just being smart is one thing, but just in general, the smarter kids are also, like what I just described earlier, more nerdy. So I guess, of course, if you're like smart but also athletic, there's a term for it that's slipping my mind. But yeah, that's, I think, then seen as cool. But to be honest, even if you were a student athlete, your peers in the sport, they would make fun of you for being smart. Like, oh, like, why are you so smart, right? So I never thought of it, but to answer your question, this probably does really negatively impact the overall US economy or whatever, because people, they aren't trying to be necessarily the smartest they can be, because it's a negative thing. You get bullied, you get made fun of.
Do you think there's something psychological underneath this? Like, why would you make fun of people who are smart? Is it because you feel in some way inferior to that person because you're dumber than that person? That's why you make fun of them?
I think bullying in general, which, we should talk about bullying in Korean society. But I think what you described is pretty universal for bullying. People who bully actually have lower self-esteem or maybe very insecure. And so they take it out by, let's say, being very aggressive towards others. Yeah.
So, yeah, I didn't want to talk about psychology per se, but I wanted to stress like how Korean people perceive smartness as being something good, to the extent of like, I don't even understand why being smart should be made fun of. Right?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, I've never really thought about this because
so to me, it's like being made fun of for looking good.
Yeah,
that's kind of weird to me.
Yeah. I think, to be honest, that happens. But looking good physically is such a there's no negative about it. You almost
just true for smartness.
In American society, let's say you're ridiculously good looking. People might make fun of you, like, oh, they're like, you're too good looking, or you're the good looking guy, right, or girl. But they let it roll off their back because they know it's a compliment at the end of the day. But smartness or being nerdy, it just takes on a different demeanor. Like, there's nothing positive about it, really. I would say, let's say in your own maybe peer group, right? Like, everyone is high performing academically. You're all focused on your studies, right? Yeah, you could then make fun of them, like, oh, you're so smart, like, you're too smart, blah, blah, blah. But in general, I think the dynamic is maybe the people who are less smart, they just make fun of the smart kids.
Interesting.
And, they're the ones who get picked on and bullied the most in school contexts or whatever. And yeah, in Korea, it sounds like that is just, it's not only not true, it's just such a foreign concept. You can't even understand why it would happen. Is that right?
Because I think that Korean society in general, everyone's nerdy to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's nerdy. So nerdy can be a bad thing, or like at least being smart can be a bad thing.
Yeah. Not just being smart though. What about everything else that is associated with being smart or being nerdy in the US? Does that exist in Korea? So, being awkward socially or having poor hygiene or unfashionable clothing, like, is that all together, or are those different characteristics?
No, not necessarily. So when you described what nerdy means in the States, I specifically can think of a word in Korea or a characteristic in Korea, but minus the being smartness.
Okay.
Specifically.
Yeah.
It's the word 진짜. And those
What's
are
that
everything that you just described.
Okay.
Minus the smartness.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know why this is the case in the US, really. But yeah, to me, as an American, they're so closely tied. Yeah, they're all bundled together in the term nerdy.
Interesting. Yeah, being jinta has nothing to do with being smart in Korea.
Okay.
It's even worse.
In fact, it's the opposite, right? Like if you're smart, you can't be chinta. Is that correct? Or you can be.
I think you can be,
Okay.
but I think they're independent.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
So let's talk about bullying briefly then, because I know bullying in Korea, at least it has a reputation of being a very, scary bullying culture, right? Obviously, there was a drama, The Glory, that came out recently that's popular, depicted bullying quite graphically and scarily. But I've always gotten this sense like bullying is very prevalent in Korean schools. So who does the bullying? Who gets bullied? Like, how does that look like in Korea?
I think bullying became apparently more of a thing nowadays than when I was in school because I'm pretty sure bullying did exist when I was going to school, but it wasn't that prevalent. I think personally, this might be a personal experience. Normally, the people who would bully you in Korean, we would call them the so-called 노는 애들,
What's that mean? The playing kids?
the playing kids or like not studying kids.
Oh, yeah.
So this again goes back to being smart.
It's similar then, right? The
similar.
kids who are not doing well in school are bullying the kids who do well.
Oh yeah, physically, most of the time physically more developed, right? Taller, more masculine, I guess. Bullying the kids who are weaker, who are jintas.
What I'm maybe learning, I would say chinta maybe sounds like the word outcast, like they're a little bit social outcasts.
Kind of.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
But I think there's like a physical characteristic of jinta as well.
Yeah.
Like, like weak, small in height, maybe overweight, or like very underweight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do they band together and like try to form their own crew to defend each other?
Sounds like a fantasy Korean webtoon
Yeah.
scenario.
But in practice, does this tend to happen, or do they just tend to be alone and loners? The chinta.
I would assume, sadly, the latter.
I see. Yeah. But no, getting back to it then. So maybe it's not too far off from the US then. I would say your typical high school show might depict the nerds being bullied by generally either the really athletic people, like the jocks, or maybe the really popular people, which usually is associated with being athletic, but maybe good looking or maybe really, wealthy. Those are the people who tend to bully the less, less off people. So maybe it's not that different. Maybe the difference is it's still related to status, but it sounds like, Jun, in Korea, being smart achieves you a certain level of status.
Yes.
That I don't think you get in the US.
Yeah, of course. I think in Korean schools, it's much more important to have good grades in school
Than anything else.
compared to American schools,
Yeah.
right? To the extent of when I was growing up, every time we have a test in school, they would print out the grade ranking from number 1 all the way down to like whatever 200.
Yes, yeah.
And they would just post it on the school bulletin.
Yeah.
So definitely grades is another social status within the school community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think in the US, they take great lengths to hide the grades of everyone because they don't want to, I don't know. It's seen as a private matter, how smart you are or how well you're doing in school. And then the other thing is, I think if you are really smart or doing well, sometimes you might try to hide it too. It's like you don't want everyone to know you're, let's say, doing well in school. Again, because it's not seen as cool to get good grades. In hindsight, even just saying that is crazy, right? Like, why should this be a bad thing? But I can assure you it is.
So this is one of my theories. The reason why getting good grades in school become a social status in Korea is because after the Korean War, right? Basically, Korea started from zero and there was no like inherited wealth or anything. Everyone started from zero. So your social status like in society was so directly related to how well you do in school. Like if you had good grade in school, you become like whatever lawyer or doctor.
Yeah.
And then your social status is so directly related to your school grades.
Yeah.
And in that sense, I think it's different from the States, right? Like
Yeah.
you having good grades, of course, it might guarantee some sort of social status, but it's like not too directly related. Just my theory.
That's interesting. I don't want to get into this other topic as well because it's going to go too long.
Yeah.
But you just touched on something that I'd like to at least preview, which is I do think in American society, we don't really think of, there's no such thing as socioeconomic status. It's just economic status. And what you just described, it's like, well, if you do well in school, you could become like a doctor, lawyer, and you could do well in society, right? Your status would go up. But in America, it's just about how much money you can make and accumulate. And that's definitely not always tied to getting good grades and going to good college. Of course, that is like a way to do it, right? Maybe the most stable, predictable way. But in America, I think people more celebrate the entrepreneur who made it from nothing, didn't do well in school, dropped out, but, you know, created this company or became super famous or wealthy by, you know, they hustled, they scraped, they got by, right? And that's how they made it in a sense. And I think that's more rewarded or looked upon favorably than just being like a nerdy person who's good at school, right? And I think there's also this term, I'd love to hear if there's a Korean equivalent of being street smart versus book smart.
Yes.
So in the US, again, book smart is you might, do well on tests, but street smart is you have a good sense of like, oh, that's a good business opportunity, or, oh, I can get out of this really tense situation using my smarts or cleverness that's completely unrelated to just like, let's say, academic knowledge, right? So yeah, I think people really do value being street smart, not just book smart. And again, in a sense, like being book smart but not street smart is something you might be, again, made fun of.
I think there's a similar term, book smart and street smart, that's used in Korean, not directly translated, but there's a word called 공부머리, 일머리, meaning like, I guess studying brain versus working brain.
Oh, yeah.
But like 일머리, I think it's more related to how good you are at your workplace in general.
Yeah.
Doesn't have the notion of street.
I see. Yeah.
Socioeconomic status versus economic status. I think that might be very unique to the US, right?
I do think so.
Yeah. Because US like historically comes from a society that didn't have a social
there is no social status.
level.
Yeah.
For instance, like Europe, they did, right?
Yeah.
Korea, we had like the yangbans or like the 귀족.
Yeah.
And the 쌍놈s, which is like
What are these terms?
the low status people.
Yeah.
So there's always like this social status that's independent to the economic status historically.
Yeah.
So I think it's very unique to the US, what you just described.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there are social statuses, but I think they're almost directly tied just to your economic status.
That's so interesting. But so I want to challenge you. For instance, there are very famous scholars in the US that might not be the richest people in the world, right?
What are some examples?
Noam Chomsky.
I don't know. That name does not ring a bell.
Oh, I think he's a famous scholar in MIT.
I believe you.
Yeah. But like, I wouldn't say that he's a rich person, right? But he's a very renowned scholar.
I see.
Or let's say whatever is.
But Jun, I consider myself a reasonably educated person in the US. That name does not ring a bell to me.
Interesting.
Right? And so, but Paris Hilton, Britney Spears, like people who are wealthy, right? I could name 100 different athletes before I name that person you just described, because they're all wealthy and kind of famous because of it. The scholars, I'm sure the US has tons of them, right? People who are researching and developing world-class medicines or cutting-edge whatever technology, but they're not as famous as the people who just make a lot of money, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah. Who are the most famous people in the US? Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, etc. Like these people who are the wealthiest people in the country. Yeah.
But yeah, Korea is definitely becoming more and more so like that too.
Yeah.
People are so obsessed with the chaebol.
Yeah, the chaebols. Yeah.
So specifically the Lee family from Samsung, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like people treat them as like the Korean royal family.
I get the sense though that they're generally hated, right?
Hated and liked at the same time.
Oh, hated, but like I guess people are jealous of them. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe similar in the US. There's this whole movement. There should be no billionaires, right? People have accumulated too much wealth. But yeah, I do think deep down everyone kind of wants to be like them, but they hate them maybe because they can't have it. But anyway, I would say generally your status in the US is just defined by how much money you have. And this does tie into being nerdy, right? Because we're saying basically nerdy in Korea doesn't exist because it's impossible for being smart to be a bad thing. Because being smart is going to net you some sort of social status in the future.
Exactly.
Right? Whereas in the US, it's like, I don't care how smart you are, right? People might respect someone who is not smart, but made a lot of money more. And like being smart in and of itself actually is just a negative, I guess, social status overall, at least growing up, right?
Interesting.
Maybe by the time you're working or in college and after that, it's different. because then everyone's in like a nerdy context, right? We're all in college, right? We all got into this college. But before then, it definitely feels like, quite negative.
I have a question for you. So with the advent of a lot of these tech giants and the tech boom
Yeah.
over the past like couple decades,
Yeah.
did it change the negative connotation of being nerdy or smart as something bad? Because I would imagine, right, like the general understanding of these people working for like Google or Meta, right?
Yeah.
It's like very nerdy, like computer scientists,
Yeah.
right? And they're making a lot of money.
Yeah, they are.
And they're very successful.
Yeah.
And these companies they became like a huge deal in the US society in general, right?
I think there's some truth to that. I could see basically being like a tech whiz. It's like you're still nerdy, but you could, they know you're going to be incredibly successful in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah. But again, it's tied directly to their ability to make a lot of money.
Interesting.
Right? Before, it's like if you were nerdy, you went on to be a math major, and maybe you eventually became a math professor, right? People would look at that as a successful career or life in the US.
Yeah.
Whereas in Korea, I still think if you became a math professor, lived a, let's say, maybe slightly above average income life in Korea, a lot more than just the money, but like social status comes along with it. And I think you would be seen as being very successful in Korea, or is that not true?
Yes and no. Because you gave the example of math professor, being a professor itself, Korea, it's a pretty successful, even economically, job, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not anymore, but throughout the years it was traditionally. So I would say, I think it boils down to how much your smartness is related to your eventual prosperity.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in the Korean society, traditionally, it was more strictly tied to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not so different after all.
Maybe it's not. This is probably one of the purposes that we're doing this podcast.
Yeah. If anything, too, though, what's hard to really, distinguish is how much, I guess, the US and Western influence is, coming into Korean society. Growing up, at least in, as an Asian American, as a Korean American, I always felt stereotyped like, oh, you're just smart, you're nerdy, you're not cool. And that's so deeply ingrained in my head, right? That now, whatever, 25, 30 years later, it's all of a sudden cool to be Korean. Like Korean music, food, entertainment, it's all very popular globally. It's really hard for my mind to reconcile that being Korean can be cool. Because growing up, it was, the opposite. Yeah, but I guess I'd love to hear your perspective. Like growing up in Korea, what made kids cool or not cool? And did people feel cool to be Korean? Like, was there a deep pride in that?
I think Korea, being a very homogenous society, right? It's nearly impossible to have a concept of being cool to be Korean because everyone's Korean.
I see.
Being cool is a relative thing, right?
Yeah, you're right.
But if everyone's Korean, you can't be cool.
Okay.
For being Korean, right? But
did you grow up with a lot of pride though in being Korean? Let's ask that.
Again, that concept is very hard to exist. Being proud of being Korean only can exist where you are living with
non-Korean
people.
Interesting. Yeah.
But interestingly enough, as the global society is becoming more international, right?
Yeah.
Now it's easy to understand how other people outside of Korea think about
perceive you.
people.
Yeah.
I think the current moment right now is probably the pinnacle of how proud to be Korean is right now.
I would agree with that. Yeah. At least, growing up, my perspective in the US is I was very proud to be American, right? It was ingrained in me that America was the best, number one, right? And I think that's where a lot of my internal strife may come because I felt American, super proud to be American. And yet I might not have been perceived as being American because of how I looked, right? I didn't look like your typical American. And, bringing this all back then, I think when Americans think of like the American dream, American success story, it's really someone just like through sheer force of will and work ethic, maybe having a good idea, but going from nothing to something, right? That is the American dream. And again, I feel like that's not really that much tied to being smart or being, nerdy or successful in school, let's say. There were many other ways to becoming successful. And yeah, that's why, I felt nerdy. And I didn't feel like that was a good thing or something to be proud of.
This might be slightly off the topic, but I think one of the reasons why American people in general eventually don't wear glasses is because nerdy is a negative thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whereas in Korea, I would say more than half of people walking down the street are wearing glasses, including myself.
You're saying, oh, yeah, there's no pressure to wear contacts or to get rid of your glasses because there's nothing negative associated with glasses.
Yeah.
If anything, is it positive? Like, oh, that person's smart.
It's neutral again.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like they're wearing glasses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I remember being really embarrassed or ashamed that I had these, to be fair, my glasses were not fashionable, but just had glasses at all.
Yeah.
And I always felt like it was something I would be made fun of for, four eyes or whatever, right? That term.
Yeah.
I would say definitely there is a pressure, at least growing up, to not wear glasses.
Mhm.
Yeah. This all changes, of course, in high fashion or, if you're a celebrity, you can make anything look cool.
Mm.
And I guess there was a wave or a trend where looking nerdy or dorky was in.
Oh, you know what comes to mind about glasses, by the way? There's this like super high fashion hipster brand in Korea called Gentle Monster.
Are they super hipster? They're pretty famous.
They're super hipster.
Gentle Monster.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And I hear that they're becoming popular outside of Korea as well.
Yeah. I think because they're so prominently featured in Korean dramas.
Maybe.
Yeah, those big black Gentle Monsters, like classic.
And their brand identity is like very, very hipster.
Are they still hipster? I feel like they are mainstream now.
Sometimes I feel like you have a better understanding of Korean culture than
I'm not sure about that, but
it might be true.
Yeah.
Like once they hit the department store, it's not hip.
Yeah.
But anyways, they try to depict themselves as like super ultra hip high fashion, but they're a glasses brand. Although they have sunglasses and whatnot.
Yeah.
Meaning that, wearing glasses can be super hipster and cool in Korea. Yeah.
Do they wear them without the lenses? Just purely fashion?
That is now going to the realm of being dorky.
In Korea?
Yeah.
That's interesting. In the US, I think it's the opposite.
진짜.
Yeah, when you wear the glasses without the lenses, it's cool. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that so fake?
It's
And
the
it's
nerdy
so
aesthetic,
apparent.
though.
It's not even subtle.
Definitely 3-4 years ago, at the very least, I think in the NBA, which I follow closely, all the athletes would come out wearing these, glasses without lenses. Yeah.
Wow.
And maybe they're trying to counteract I'm just a dumb athlete. I can be smart too. Like, consider my intelligence independent of my athleticism. I think there's some of that they're fighting too. But yeah, that was totally a thing.
That's so interesting. Because I don't know a lot about fashion, but what I know about fashion is that the number one rule of being good at fashion is that trying not to look that like glasses without the lenses is so obviously you just want it for fashion.
I don't know fashion either, but I can assure you that was a thing. Yeah.
Okay, so we start from fashion and then we're ending with fashion.
Did we start with fashion? Oh, we did. The nerdy brand. Yeah. So, yep, that's the episode for today. I hope you all enjoyed it. I am nerdy and now proud of being it, but high school, middle school me for sure was not. But yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, follow us on social media at Korean American Podcast, and we hope to see you next week.
Bye.
Hey everyone, this is Jun,
And I'm Daniel.
and we are
Wait, you're Korean.
American.
We got to start over.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I would have kept it.